I never expected that a citywide power outage would change my life, but that's exactly what happened. For most people, it was an inconvenience, a disruption to the steady rhythm of modern life. For me, it was the moment the world went quiet enough for me to finally hear what my heart had been trying to say for months. It all started with the man who lived in apartment 2B, one floor directly below mine. My name is Miles, and at the time, my life was a carefully curated collection of quiet routines. As a freelance illustrator, my apartment was my entire world, my office, my studio, my sanctuary. I worked from a drafting table wedged into the corner of my living room, overlooking the street through a large picture window. From this perch, I saw the neighborhood wake up and go to sleep. And from this perch, I first saw Caleb. He moved in during the late summer, a season of oppressive heat that made the very air feel thick and heavy. I watched from my window as he unloaded a small moving truck mostly by himself. He was, for lack of a more sophisticated word, captivating. Broad-shouldered and lean, with arms that showed the clear definition of physical work, he moved with an easy, unforced confidence. He wore a simple gray t-shirt, dark with sweat, and a pair of worn jeans. I told myself I was just a curious neighbor, but my pencil stopped moving across the paper every time he hefted another heavy box or piece of furniture as if it were nothing. In the weeks that followed, he became a regular feature of my daily observations. I learned his schedule without ever speaking to him. He left early in the morning, usually carrying a thermos and a metal lunchbox, and returned in the late afternoon, often covered in a fine layer of sawdust that clung to his dark hair. I pieced together that he was a carpenter or something similar. Sometimes, on weekends, the faint, rhythmic sound of sanding or the low hum of a power tool would drift up through my floorboards. It was a strangely comforting noise, a reminder that I wasn't entirely alone in the building. He seemed like a man who was comfortable in his own skin, someone who belonged to the world of solid, tangible things. He built things with his hands, while I spent my days creating worlds on paper that existed only in my imagination. He was all solid lines and definite angles. I was shading and nuance. We felt like opposites, inhabitants of different planets that just happened to share the same gravitational pull of a four-story apartment building. Our interactions were minimal, limited to the kind of brief, polite exchanges that happened between neighbors. A nod in the hallway, a shared moment of impatience while waiting for the slow, creaking elevator. He had a smile that was quick and genuine, crinkling the corners of his eyes. "Hey," he'd say, his voice a low, pleasant rumble, and I'd offer a quiet, "Hey," back, my own voice feeling thin and inadequate in comparison. I built an entire narrative for him in my head. He probably played sports on the weekend, met up with his buddies to watch the game at a loud bar, and had a pretty girlfriend who was just as effortlessly charming as he was. He was, in my mind, a perfect picture of conventional, confident masculinity. He was straight. Of course, he was straight. It was a foregone conclusion, a wall I built around my own burgeoning interest to keep it from growing into anything foolish, anything that could lead to disappointment. So I kept my distance, content to watch from my window, to appreciate him the way one might appreciate a beautiful piece of art in a museum, from behind a velvet rope, with a clear understanding that it was not something I could ever touch. I was safe in my quiet routine. My life was predictable, orderly, and emotionally sterile. I had my work, my books, my small circle of friends I texted with but rarely saw in person. It was enough. Or at least, I had convinced myself it was enough. I had learned long ago that wanting more was a dangerous game. It was safer to observe life than to participate in it too fully, safer to imagine connection than to risk the messy, unpredictable reality of it. Caleb was a part of that imagined life. A pleasant, harmless crush on the handsome downstairs neighbor. It was a story I told myself, a little bit of color in an otherwise monochrome existence. I never, in a million years, expected him to knock on my door. I certainly never expected that knock to come during a citywide blackout, plunging us both into a darkness that would, paradoxically, illuminate everything. But that's how life works sometimes, isn't it? The biggest changes are rarely announced. They arrive quietly, on a Tuesday night, with a gentle knock and the sudden, unnerving absence of light. The power went out at precisely 9:13 in the evening. I remember the exact time because I had just glanced at the clock on my microwave, contemplating a late-night cup of tea. One moment, my apartment was filled with the warm, yellow glow of my reading lamp and the low hum of the refrigerator. The next, it was absolute silence and a profound, inky blackness. My laptop, which had been my companion all evening, died with a soft electronic sigh. I sat there for a few seconds, blinking, as if that could somehow convince my eyes to work in the sudden void. The abrupt absence of ambient noise was the most jarring part. No hum from the fridge, no buzz from the lamp, no distant drone of traffic from the street below. The entire city seemed to have been put on mute. I fumbled for my phone, its screen a blinding beacon in the dark. 6% battery. Of course. My first thought was a practical, slightly panicked one about the deadlines I had. My second was a more primal sense of isolation. There's a special kind of loneliness that comes with a power outage when you live by yourself. You're suddenly trapped in your own space, with nothing but your thoughts for company. I made my way to the window, guided by the muscle memory of my own apartment. The view that was usually a glittering tapestry of streetlights and lit windows was now a black hole, punctuated only by the distant sweep of car headlights. It was the whole neighborhood, the whole city, it seemed. I managed to find a few decorative candles I'd bought ages ago and never used. After a few minutes of clumsy searching, I located a lighter in my junk drawer. Soon, my living room was filled with the flickering, dancing light of 3 vanilla-scented candles. It was better than the darkness, but the shadows it cast seemed to make the room feel larger and more empty. I sat on my sofa, phone dark to preserve the last dregs of power, and resigned myself to a long, quiet night. And then I heard it, a soft, hesitant knock on my door. It was so unexpected that I froze, my heart giving a sudden, anxious thud against my ribs. No one ever knocked on my door. Packages were left in the lobby. Friends texted before coming over. My mind raced through a list of unlikely possibilities. A building manager with news? A lost delivery person? I moved to the door, peering through the peephole into the equally dark hallway. A figure was standing there, a vague silhouette. My hand hesitated on the lock. Then the figure shifted, and a bit of stray moonlight from the hallway window caught his profile. It was Caleb. I opened the door a few inches, my heart now beating for an entirely different reason. He was standing there, holding his phone, its screen dark. He looked even more striking in the dramatic, low light of the hallway, his features carved out of shadow. He gave me a slightly sheepish smile. "Hey, sorry to bother you so late," he started, his voice a little lower than usual, more intimate in the quiet. "This is a really weird question, but the power's out everywhere, and my phone just died. I was wondering if you, maybe had one of those portable charger things? A power bank? Mine's dead too." His request hung in the air between us. It was such a simple, normal thing to ask, yet it felt monumental. It was the first real conversation we'd ever had. I found my own voice, trying to keep it steady. "Oh, yeah, I think I have one. But I'm pretty sure it's dead too. I haven't charged it in ages." My brain was screaming at me. Of all the times to be unprepared. He seemed to deflate a little, a small sigh escaping his lips. Okay. No worries. Worth a shot, right?" He started to turn away. And in that moment, some unfamiliar, impulsive part of me took over. The part that was tired of watching from the window. The part that didn't want him to just walk away into the darkness. "Wait," I said, the word coming out a little louder than I intended. He stopped and turned back, his expression curious. "I mean, I have candles lit. It's better than sitting in the dark, anyway. If you wanna, hang out until the power comes back on." I couldn't believe the words were coming out of my mouth. The offer felt clumsy and desperate, and I braced myself for a polite refusal. Caleb looked from me to the flickering lights spilling out of my open door, and then back to me. A slow smile spread across his face, the one that reached his eyes. "Yeah," he said, his voice laced with what sounded like genuine relief. "Yeah, I'd really like that." He stepped across the threshold, and as I closed the door behind him, I felt a distinct click, not just in the lock, but somewhere deep inside me. The carefully constructed boundary between my world and his had just dissolved. He brought the darkness of the hallway in with him, but he also brought a presence that seemed to push back the emptiness of my apartment. Suddenly, the space didn't feel so large. The candlelight, which had seemed lonely before, now felt intimate and conspiratorial. We were two people sharing a small island of light in a sea of darkness. "So, you're an illustrator?" he asked, his eyes scanning the sketches and prints pinned to the corkboard above my desk. He moved with a surprising grace, his curiosity genuine. He wasn't just glancing. He was really looking, his head tilted as he took in the details of a piece I was working on. It was a fantastical landscape, full of strange flora and floating islands. "Yeah, mostly children's books and some editorial stuff," I replied, feeling a familiar twinge of self-consciousness about my work. It always felt a little flimsy, a little silly, when presented to people who did real, tangible things for a living. I expected a simple, "That's cool," and for the conversation to move on. But Caleb surprised me. He pointed to a detail in the corner, a tiny, glowing mushroom. "I love the way you've handled the light here," he said. "It looks like it's actually emitting a glow, not just colored yellow. How do you do that?" The question was specific, thoughtful. It was the kind of question another artist would ask. And just like that, we were talking. Really talking. I explained my process, the layering of watercolors and digital touch-ups. He listened intently, asking more questions, his interest pulling the words out of me. I, in turn, asked him about the sawdust. "I'm a furniture maker," he confirmed. "Custom pieces mostly. I have a workshop downtown, but I do some of the finishing work at home." He spoke about wood the way I spoke about paper and ink. He described the personalities of different grains, the stubbornness of oak, the buttery smoothness of maple, the rich, dark secrets of walnut. He talked about the satisfaction of taking something raw and shaping it into something both beautiful and useful. As he spoke, his hands moved, sketching shapes in the air, a carpenter's muscle memory. I realized then that we weren't so different after all. We were both makers. We just used different materials. He had a bottle of red wine in his apartment, which he went down to get. We drank it out of my coffee mugs, sitting on the floor, leaning against the sofa. The formality of our previous non-relationship evaporated in the warm, flickering light. He told me about growing up in a small town, about the pressure to take over his father's hardware store, and his decision to pursue woodworking instead. It was a quiet rebellion, he explained, but a necessary one. This was the moment my carefully constructed image of him began to crumble. The one-dimensional, super-confident jock I had invented was being replaced by this thoughtful, articulate man who spoke about his passion with a soft-spoken intensity. There was a vulnerability there, a hint of a struggle I never would have guessed at. He wasn't the finished, polished product I had seen from my window. He was a work in progress, just like me. At one point, our knees brushed as he shifted his position. It was the briefest of contacts, lasting no more than a second, but it sent a jolt of electricity through me. I pulled my leg back instinctively, a silent apology. But when I glanced at him, he was already looking at me, and his expression wasn't annoyed or oblivious. It was something else, something I couldn't quite name, but it made my breath catch in my throat. We fell into a comfortable silence, the only sound the soft hiss of the candle wicks. He was looking around the room again, his gaze lingering on my bookshelf. "You have a lot of poetry," he observed. I felt a blush creep up my neck. "Oh yeah? It's a bit of a weakness." I expected a gentle ribbing, but instead, he said, "Me too." That was the moment. The small, significant moment that changed everything. It wasn't the shared wine or the talk of our work. It was that simple admission. "Me too." Two words that bridged the gap between his world and mine, revealing a common ground I never would have imagined. He wasn't just the handsome carpenter from 2B anymore. He was Caleb, and he liked poetry. My carefully guarded heart beat a little faster, stirred by the most dangerous emotion of all, hope. The hours melted away. We talked about everything and nothing, bad movies, favorite foods, the strange characters in our neighborhood. Laughter came easily, filling the quiet apartment. It felt less like a first meeting and more like a reunion with a friend I hadn't seen in years. The initial pretext for his visit, the dead phones, the need for a charger, was long forgotten. We were just two people, talking in the dark. At some point, one of the candles burned down, its wick sputtering out with a final, smoky sigh. The reduction in light made the space feel even smaller, more intimate. We were sitting closer now than we had been at the beginning of the night. The space between us was charged, filled with an unspoken energy. My entire being was aware of his proximity, the warmth radiating from his body, the faint scent of sawdust and soap. Our conversation eventually lulled, and we found ourselves in another comfortable silence. But this one felt different. It wasn't empty, it was full of all the things we weren't saying. I watched the flame of the remaining candle dance, its light reflecting in his dark eyes. He was looking at me, his expression unreadable but intense. "You know," he said, his voice quiet, almost a whisper, breaking the stillness. "I'm really glad the power went out." My heart stopped. It was a simple sentence, but it was loaded with meaning. He wasn't just being polite. He wasn't just saying he was glad to have company instead of sitting alone in the dark. The way he said it, the way he was looking at me as he said it, it was a confession. It was an admission that this, right here, this unexpected, candlelit evening, was something he valued, something he wanted. I couldn't find my voice. I could only meet his gaze, my own eyes wide, trying to communicate everything I was feeling without words. The hope, the fear, the overwhelming sense that we were standing on the edge of something significant. It was a moment of pure, terrifying vulnerability. I felt seen in a way I hadn't felt in a very, very long time. He didn't look away. He held my gaze, and a small, almost nervous smile touched his lips. It was as if he had laid a single card on the table and was waiting to see if I would play one of my own. All the air seemed to have been sucked out of the room. The world had shrunk to the space between us, to the flickering candlelight and the unspoken question hanging in the air. This was the turning point. The moment when a polite encounter between neighbors tipped over into something else entirely. Something fragile and hopeful and real. And I had no idea what to do next. And then, as if on cue, the world came roaring back to life. A lamp in the corner flickered on, harsh and white. The refrigerator hummed, its motor kicking into gear with a loud shudder. The power was back. The sudden, sterile brightness of the electric light felt like an intrusion, a violation of the soft, intimate world we had built in the dark. We both flinched, blinking against the unexpected glare. The magic of the moment was shattered. Caleb immediately scrambled to his feet, running a hand through his hair in a gesture that seemed almost comically flustered. "Oh, wow. Okay. Well," he stammered, his easy confidence from earlier completely gone. The return of the light seemed to have returned our roles as well. Neighbors, near strangers. "Yeah, I guess it's back," I said, my own voice sounding hollow and strange in the newly noisy room. I stood up too, feeling awkward and exposed. The coffee mugs with the dregs of wine, the melted puddles of wax on the saucer. It all looked messy and a little pathetic in the unforgiving light of a 60-watt bulb. I should probably go," Caleb said, already moving toward the door. "It's late. You've probably got work to do tomorrow." He wasn't looking at me anymore. He was looking at the door, at the floor, anywhere but at my face. The easy connection, the intense eye contact from moments before, had vanished as if it had never happened. "Okay," I managed to say, following him to the entryway. The space between us now felt like a chasm. What had happened? 1 minute, we were on the verge of something. The next, we were performing this awkward dance of departure. Did I imagine it all? Did I misread that look, that tone of voice? He paused at the open door, finally turning to face me. "Thanks again," he said, the words feeling like a formal dismissal. For the company, he gave me a quick, tight-lipped smile that didn't come close to reaching his eyes, and then he was gone, pulling my door quietly shut behind him. I was left standing in my brightly lit, humming apartment, feeling more alone than I had in the total darkness. I spent the next 2 days in a state of suspended animation, replaying every moment of that night over and over in my head. My work sat untouched on my drafting table. I drank cup after cup of tea, staring out my window, but not really seeing anything. My mind was a relentless loop of analysis. "I'm really glad the power went out," the words echoed in my thoughts. I dissected them from every possible angle. Was it just a nice thing to say? A simple pleasantry after I'd offered him shelter from the dark? Or was it more? Was it the opening I thought it was, a signal that he felt the same strange, powerful pull that I did? And if it was, why did he run the second the lights came back on? The sudden return to normalcy had thrown him into a panic. Maybe he regretted his moment of vulnerability. Maybe, in the clear light of day, he was horrified by the intimacy we had shared. Maybe my carefully constructed narrative was right all along. He was straight, and he'd had a moment of confusing, wine-fueled camaraderie with his lonely, gay neighbor, and now he was embarrassed. The thought was a cold, heavy stone in my stomach. This internal debate was exhausting. Hope and fear were at war, and I was the battlefield. One moment, I'd remember the way he looked at my drawings, the genuine interest in his voice, and I'd feel a surge of optimism. He saw me. He liked what he saw. The next moment, I'd picture his hasty retreat, his averted eyes, and my stomach would clench with the familiar dread of rejection. Navigating the building became a minefield of anxiety. I started taking the stairs instead of the elevator, terrified of being trapped in a small metal box with him and the crushing weight of our shared, unresolved moment. On the one occasion I couldn't avoid it, I saw him at the end of the hallway, heading for the mailboxes. Our eyes met for a fraction of a second. I saw a flicker of something in his expression, panic, awkwardness, before he quickly looked down. "Hey," he mumbled as we passed, his voice flat. "Hey," I replied to his back, my own voice barely a whisper. The easy nod we used to share was gone, replaced by this thick, suffocating tension. The silence between us now was not the comfortable, intimate silence of candlelight. It was a strained, awkward silence, loud with unspoken words and unanswered questions. It was, I realized with a sinking heart, so much worse than the polite distance we'd maintained before. I had traded my safe, observant loneliness for this new, agonizing state of uncertainty. I had let a little bit of hope in, and now my peace was ruined. I almost wished the power had never gone out at all. I almost wished he had never knocked on my door. After another 24 hours of this silent torture, I knew something had to give. I couldn't live like this, tiptoeing around my own apartment building, my stomach in knots every time I heard footsteps in the hall. The uncertainty was eating me alive. I had to know. Even if the answer was the one I dreaded, it would be better than this limbo. I decided that if I saw him again, I would say something. I didn't know what. Maybe just, "Hey, was everything okay the other night?" It was a weak opening, but it was something. It was an attempt to reclaim some control over the situation, to stop being a passive observer of my own life. I rehearsed the line in my head until it lost all meaning. I paced my apartment, my anxiety building with every step. I didn't have to wait long. That evening, just as I was mustering the courage to perhaps go downstairs and knock on his door, there was a knock on mine. It was the same soft, hesitant knock as before. My heart leaped into my throat. I stood frozen for a second, my carefully rehearsed lines vanishing from my brain. I took a deep breath and opened the door. It was Caleb, just as I knew it would be. He stood there, looking even more nervous than I felt. He wasn't smiling. His hands were shoved into his pockets, and his shoulders were tense. He looked like a man about to face a firing squad. "Hey," he said, his voice quiet and strained. Can I talk to you for a minute?" "Of course," I said, stepping back to let him in. He walked into the living room and stood in the middle of the floor, not moving to sit down. The air was thick with a palpable tension. This was it, the moment of truth. He took a deep breath, his eyes fixed on some point over my shoulder. "Look, Miles," he began, "I need to apologize. I was a complete idiot the other night when the power came back on. And I've been an even bigger idiot for the last 2 days." He finally met my eyes, and I could see a genuine anguish in them. "I'm sorry if I made things weird between us." I just shook my head, unable to form words. He took my silence as a cue to continue, the words tumbling out of him in a rush. "The thing is, I need to be honest with you about that night. The whole reason I came up here." He paused, swallowing hard. "My phone wasn't dead, and my power bank wasn't dead either. It was fully charged." I stared at him, my mind trying to process this revelation. It didn't make any sense. "What? Then? Why?" He finally let out a long, shaky breath, and some of the tension seemed to leave his shoulders. He looked directly at me, his gaze unwavering and full of a raw, terrifying honesty. "Because I've been trying to work up the nerve to talk to you for months," he confessed, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "I've seen you at your window when I get home from work. I saw you in the lobby that one time, sketching in a little notebook. I wanted to know you, but I'm a coward. I couldn't just knock on your door and say hi. I needed an excuse." He went on, his voice gaining a little more confidence as he laid everything bare. "So when the power went out, I saw my chance. It was the perfect, stupidest excuse I could think of. I just wanted a reason to be in the same room with you, to talk to you for more than 2 seconds in the hallway. And it was even better than I could have imagined. Talking with you, it was so easy. It was the easiest thing in the world. He took a step closer to me. When I said I was glad the power went out, I meant it. It was the best thing that's happened to me in a very long time. And then the lights came on, and I panicked. It all felt too real, too fast. I got scared. Scared of what it meant. Scared of what you might think. Scared of this. He gestured to the space between us. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my ears. All my fears, all my anxieties, they were all wrong. He wasn't embarrassed. He was scared, just like me. I finally found my voice. I was scared too, I whispered. A look of profound relief washed over his face. So you felt it too. I nodded, a slow, deliberate movement. Caleb, I've been watching you from my window since the day you moved in. The confession felt momentous, a mirror of his own. A slow, beautiful smile spread across his face, the first genuine one I had seen in days. It was like the sun breaking through the clouds. He closed the remaining distance between us, stopping just a foot away. So, he said softly, now that we've established we're both cowards who spend way too much time staring at each other, what do we do now? And instead of answering with words, I did the bravest thing I have ever done in my entire life. I closed the final inches between us and kissed him. It wasn't a hesitant, questioning kiss. It was a kiss full of all the relief and longing and hope that had been building for days, for months. And after a split second of surprise, he kissed me back, his hand coming up to cup the back of my neck, pulling me closer. It felt like coming home. It felt like the lights coming on, but this time, it wasn't harsh or jarring. It was warm, and it was right. In the weeks and months that followed, Caleb and I built something real, something tangible, right there in the space between our two apartments. Our first official date was a walk through the city, ending at a small, crowded poetry reading he had found online. We held hands the entire time, a simple, public declaration that felt both thrilling and perfectly natural. He showed me his workshop, a beautiful, chaotic space that smelled of sawdust and varnish, and I watched, mesmerized, as he worked, his hands shaping wood with a confident, gentle touch. He, in turn, would spend hours in my apartment while I worked, sitting quietly on the sofa, reading a book, perfectly content to just share the same space. He was the best kind of company, a silent, comforting presence that soothed the anxious corners of my mind. He made me feel seen, not just as an artist, but as a person. He saw the parts of me I often kept hidden, the quiet insecurities and the secret hopes, and he didn't run from them. He embraced them. My apartment, once my solitary sanctuary, transformed. It became our space. His well-worn jacket was often slung over the back of a dining chair. A ridiculously oversized coffee mug he favored sat permanently on my kitchen counter. The sounds from his apartment below no longer felt distant. They were the familiar, comforting rhythms of our shared life. We weren't just neighbors anymore. We were partners. One rainy Saturday, about 6 months later, we were curled up on my sofa, watching an old movie. A storm was raging outside, the wind rattling the windows. Suddenly, the lights flickered, dimmed, and then went out, plunging us into the familiar, sudden darkness. The refrigerator hummed to a stop. The silence descended. I felt a smile spread across my face in the dark. I felt Caleb shift beside me, his arm tightening around my shoulders. "Well, this feels familiar," he murmured, his voice a low, warm rumble against my ear. I could hear the smile in his voice, too. "Don't worry," I said, leaning my head against his chest, feeling the steady, strong beat of his heart beneath my ear. "I think we know what to do this time," he chuckled, a deep, happy sound that filled the darkness. He tilted my chin up and kissed me, a slow, confident kiss that tasted of home. It's funny, isn't it? How we build walls to protect ourselves, how we create safe, predictable routines to avoid the risk of getting hurt. I had a whole world contained within the four walls of my apartment, a life I observed through a pane of glass. I thought I was safe there. But safety is just another word for stagnation. True living, I've learned, happens when you take a risk. It happens when you open the door to a stranger in the dark. Sometimes, you need the entire world to go black to finally see what's been right in front of you all along.